the format that we normally go by is Laura and I will have a conversation about the topic, leveraging the entire trade show, uncovering and exploiting all components and value adds or added value. And so we'll get it as deep as we can into that topic, and then as we get to a good breaking point, we'll stop and we'll probably have answered a lot of the questions that were pre-submitted at that point, and then certainly can open it up for additional questions. And again, we'll ask you to unmute when we do that. So it's a real pleasure to have you here today. Our webinars normally attract people from all over the world, certainly from each continent, and this is a topic, trade shows are a topic that frustrates a lot of companies and challenges them to get great value, and we're really privileged today to have Laura Palker with us, the CEO of Trade Show Solution Center, and they are experts in the field of helping companies build the key assets and strategies around executing trade shows. So we're really delighted to have you with us today, Laura, and please welcome.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you and have this conversation. We have been partnering with clients to create environments with commercial spaces and trade shows for 15 years, and I've been working in the industry for 30 plus years. Sometimes I think, oh, I'm not old enough for that, and then realize to the contrary, I am.
Well, you started when you were just a teen, probably, so it's all
exactly.
It's all good. It's all good. So you kind of started us down the road of telling us about Trade Show Solutions Center, but let's add to that a little bit. So if you can give us just maybe a good thumbnail in terms of your services, what when clients come to you, what are the services you provide?
So we work with companies to create programs, and the easiest way that I can explain that is that the entire process of a trade show or creating a retail space is really tied into the company's overall growth plan, their marketing plan, creating a strategic plan for a start, a finish, for measuring results, for follow-up, for maintenance. And so it really is a conversation that has to go far beyond just the marketing department. In addition to that, companies really need to have a well thought out marketing plan that goes beyond the budget. So they need to understand who's their target audience, what are their goals and objectives, what type of growth do they want to recognize, and will that be cross-platform? Are there more products and services that create a family of solutions for the attendee? And then that goes right to the show floor when it comes to trade shows on picking the right show, because in every show there's a prospectus and there's a very detailed profile of the attendee in terms of their decision-making power, their budgets, and working with show management is critical right from the start in being able to understand these statistics and the data. Is the data audited? Is the data a piece of marketing material that really has not been substantiated for a few years? It's all important to really drill down and dig deep. So we work with clients right from the beginning to develop a strategic plan, to come up with a program that will bring them through their initial show and ongoing. Most companies that we work with are participating in anywhere from 4 to 60 shows a year. So we want to make sure that we're getting the right messaging, that we're understanding what the goals and objectives are, and that we can be a partner and that we can support them with ongoing data and details. And then we design and build the tools, whether that's their a 10 by 10 exhibit or a 40 by 50 foot exhibit, whether it's an 8-foot height restriction or it's a double decker. So we're very, very knowledgeable in terms of each of the facilities where major trade shows are held in the United States with regards to the construction detail, the height, the labor rules and regulations, whether the state is a right to work state or it is a union state, and all of that bears importance when determining what the budgets will be and what it will cost to use the tools that we design and build. And then we take that one step further in the property management and making sure that we have the graphics produced in time, on budget, that they are everything is at the show as needed, and that it gets set up, it's handled carefully, that we're conscious of the refurbished cost. If it's a rental, that we're taking care of the client's needs specifically for that show and customizing the frames and products that are in our inventory. And then we store and transport. So we do have a full service turnkey solution, and we can either break it up and partner with other vendors or handle the entire process. And that also includes booking hotels, negotiating contracts, selecting the booth space, location applies very much in the trade show world and environment, and then dealing with, again, show management with seniority points and being very creative to make sure that the exhibitor has everything that can be in their favor.
Mm-hmm. That sounds wonderful. So if I were going to summarize, which, it's kind of good to put things in bullets here a little bit. So the core services are strategy, planning, then the actual hardware, the booth, and all of the graphic elements to promote the business, and then also the logistical supports. Are those kind of the four big buckets or three big buckets?
Those are the three big buckets, and then training.
And then training. Okay, cool, excellent.
Training is more so with the booth staff.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so getting in a little bit to, obviously you support clients and their trade show endeavors. Do you also use trade shows yourself to build your business? And if so, how?
Absolutely. We participate in trade shows. There are shows that we actually exhibit in. There are shows that we actually work for show management in training their first-time exhibitors to increase the renewal on the show floor at the end of the show for the following year. And then we work with show management. We're on several advisory committees for some local trade shows that are in the New York area to help them to better serve their exhibitors and to help them understand and to help them fill the needs of their customer base.
Sure. So I'm going to take one more swipe at the actual question, which was with trade show solution centers, do you participate in trade shows from a standpoint of building your business? In other words, do you exhibit? Do you speak? Do you sponsor? Do you walk through? So how do you participate from a business development standpoint in trade shows?
Well, we actually practice what we preach. So we every year we develop a marketing plan. We create an editorial calendar that is in alignment with the target audience that we want to reach that year. We look at where are our customers in terms of what industries and what shows are they in, and we pick our target audience based on that profile so that we can add to existing business on the show floor. We research through the internet what shows those customers are going to, and then we pick those shows to exhibit in so that we can do some pre-show marketing. We can work with show management in expanding our exposure on the show floor with sponsorships. We always get in front of the attendee audience by taking on a speaker opportunity or being involved in an expert panel position. We work with show management on looking at how we can help them, what can we offer them to create a win-win situation in the relationship, because they have tons of information. They have relationships, they have research departments, and so by building a relationship with the show management, we're able to access more qualifying data that can help us in the development of our messaging, in building the brand and creating our presence on the show floor and reinforcing our reputation in the industry. And when we go to the show, we're really looking to create a relationship with the attendee. We want to create a relationship with the subcontractors that are on the show floor. We want to create a relationship with the people that are operating the docks. We want to reinforce relationships with the people who are doing the marketing for the show, and we want to get very much involved with building relationships with the press and the media, because most shows are either produced or have significant relationships with the trade publications and with the marketing outlets.
Gotcha. Cool. That's great. So let's really dive into our topic, and our topic is really around, and the observation we've had and why we wanted to talk about this today is we've seen in many situations when whether someone buys a booth or a sponsorship, there are so many values that come along with those. Often there's so many different components of that besides, the 10 by 10 or the 40 by 40 space or the, sort of the principal value of being a sponsor. There are a lot of subsidiary values. And so what we really want to kind of get into is, looking at the entire trade show. Let's maybe take the example of an exhibitor, and think about, and to you, what does it mean, when you exhibit or when you're working with a client that's exhibiting to leverage the entire show? What are the, besides the 10 by 10 or 40 by 40 space, what else is there that we ought to know about and make sure we take advantage of?
My experience has been that most people buy a booth space and they are very reactionary to the trade show environment. And the return on investment is significantly reduced with that approach. And so what we do is we want to sit down with the exhibitor and we want to understand their growth goals, because on the trade show floor, in the 2 or 3 day setting, a year's worth of work can be done if it is properly planned and managed. So what do I mean by that? Focus groups. Everyone has to go out to dinner. The sales staff can reach out to key prospects and invite them to a dinner and have a focus group type format so that they're getting market data in real time. The speaker platforms, setting yourself up as the leader in the industry is critical because the market tends to attract itself to the leaders. The being able to do competitive analysis, do research on what are the competitors saying, what's their messaging, how are they presenting themselves. Looking at, again, the media, it is a great time to hold a press event, either in the booth or in a conference room. Marketing opportunities and sponsorship opportunities, supporting show management, the show management that's putting on the show is critical because then you're getting more impressions. Now remember, most people are getting a 10 by 10 booth or a 10 by 20 foot booth. They're sending 2 people. Sometimes they're understaffed and send 1 person to the show floor. There isn't any pre-show marketing done. And they're really relying on the fact that they're going to intercept someone who is on their way to a scheduled appointment. Now let's listen to those words carefully. They're trying to intercept someone who's on their way to a scheduled appointment. So they're having to overcome the obstacle of interrupting someone. They're having to overcome the obstacle of a mind shift change in order to attract them and to qualify them and to gather their information in a data form or in a scan. And the period of time that they have to speak with an attendee is 3 seconds to 3 minutes. So, and that number varies, plus or minus 1 or 2 either way, depending upon the size of the booth and depending upon the professionalism of the presentation. And that's a whole nother conversation in terms of what is the messaging and how is it being delivered. So in most cases, upper management will put their people on a trade show floor and it's a setup for failure. And that's why it's so frustrating, because then they have to go back into the office and they have to disclose the results, follow up on the leads, and then convey to the finance department what the conversion rate was and really did that translate into dollars and cents.
Right.
When, at the end of the day, was there planning on the messaging? Were professionals brought in to deliver the message? And that's important because people go to the trade show floor and they go in their own skill set. So marketing people speak marketing language. Technical people speak the technical ease. But there hasn't been a moment to understand what is the company's message. And then very few companies will go through the role play before the show. Actually getting in a space and reviewing scripts, having a role play and an interaction with another human being. Many times there'll be a person who is scared to death of public speaking or even has the tendency to be shy or bashful, sitting in a booth, and those people are often found behind the newspaper eating their lunch. So again, it's that whole engine that you're building that has to be reviewed and needs to be planned, and then there needs to be roles and responsibilities, and then the tools provided for the person to be able to engage and create results.
Sure. So
pre-show
if
promotion.
if I can interrupt the, so maybe, and I may not have asked the question well, but for the moment, and I think what you're sharing is really valuable. But and I guess what I'm thinking of are when you become an exhibitor, part of what you get is that exhibit space, but quite often the exhibit host company or the trade show host company will also have website resources that are available. In other words, you can put marketing information and links on their website. You might have social media, a variety of social media promotions that are added into your purchase of booth space. Sometimes they do have speaking opportunities, although often that's a separate, completely separate than booth purchasing. Sometimes there's access to putting information on the app. There is maybe post-event the ability to get the attendee list, sans email addresses or whatnot. But I guess the first element is sort of, again, thinking of, okay, we just bought a booth. What did we buy with this booth? And quite often when I go to trade show websites, I'll see that people aren't even taking advantage of getting the blurb about their company on the website, even if the sort of the fundamental things, let alone the more strategic things that you're talking about. And would you mind addressing that for a minute? You've become an exhibitor. There are a certain amount of values or assets included in that. What are the ones we ought to make sure we take advantage of within that specific purchase?
Well, Bill, the important thing to call out here is that you have a space. This is basically a predetermined square footage of concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the items, the menu of tools that you had just brought to light. Populating the data, okay, content is critical. Everything is going to be predicated on content. However, the second most important thing is that you have to be able to deliver the message that the content is there. So these are staging areas that sit on the web, but if nobody knows they're there, they bring no value to you. If you're not including a link to the show and a link to the description of your company on the show floor, in your email signatures or in your pre-show promotions or on in the sending out a press release internally in the company so that your sales team and your sales staff can deliver the message and drive traffic to that website, there's a high probability that no one's going to see the information that you put on those specific areas. So if you're not driving people to the show website, if you're not driving people to the speaker session, if you're not talking about your participation in the show by either having it listed on your company website and in your email signatures, in your social media, then there's a high probability that it's a waste of time because no one's going to see it. So again,
sure. So
we go back to the planning part of it, is that what are the tools that are available? What is the content that we're going to populate these fields with? And then how are we going to get the exposure of that message? The show management role is to attract qualified attendees so that you can position yourself and that you can focus on that qualified attendee so that you can make a conversion and create a customer.
Perfect. No, that's fantastic. So, I think looking at sort of what's available that sort of comes with that purchase that's in that package, and there's similar values that are included in a sponsor package, as most people know, and then looking more broadly at what else is going on in the show, as you mentioned, making sure that that someone from your company is speaking, or maybe multiple people, and that you're participating in the networking events and all those types of sessions. The other thing that we see quite often that people don't take advantage of that you might speak to is, most conferences have a variety of educational content opportunities. Some, obviously, in some cases, it makes sense to see if you can speak, but there also seems to be an underutilization of getting the sales team into relevant client content. In other words, content that attracts their client ought to be something that attracts the salespeople. I guess I'm sort of throwing that out there. How do you work with your clients in that regard, or what are your thoughts in terms of making sure that the salespeople are in workshops that their clients would be interested in, or their prospective clients?
That's a fantastic point, though, because that's really going to drill down to budgets, and that's going to drill down to having the right amount of booth staff in the space. And so many times I've seen that so I see two things relative to that point. One is that there's not clear communication and defined roles and responsibilities as to what we need to accomplish on the show floor. So people are either having the right number of booth staff members, but they're sort of just milling around, and they're impacted by many different things. They're impacted by messaging. They're impacted by the ambient noise and sound in the environment that they're really not used to, and it takes a little while to acclimate to that. They're also being impacted by existing relationships. So they're left to their own devices. And again, that goes back to the planning. What are the roles and responsibilities? What is the schedule? And then looking at the educational tracks from an overall company perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a sales perspective, from an executive management perspective, and then scheduling who will attend what, and then bringing back and debriefing after the show is critical as well. What we see many times is that the sales staff is able to go to the show, they meet with their clients, they reinforce everything that has to do with what's in it for me, and there are some deficiencies when it comes to why are we there for the company. There are top leads that end up with the business card in the salesperson's pocket, and then the suit goes to the dry cleaner, and that's a missed opportunity. It is a mobile office, and it is a structured environment that requires discipline and requires a system and process to be set up so that there can be a reinforcement of the work that's done on the show floor post-show. And if we've just gone and put a fishbowl on a table and filled it with business cards, we might as well have picked up, gone to the website and made cold calls from the exhibitor list or the attendee list.
Totally.
It is about qualifying leads. It's about creating the first step in a business opportunity that we're at the show, not just to get a bunch of names, because there's a lot less expensive ways to do that. Sure.
So just get the yellow pages. Two other maybe quick topic areas, Laura, and then we'll open it up for questions, and we'll flip over to the questions that were pre-submitted as well. So the two topics I'd like to touch on as well would be the idea of testing, and I'll talk about that in just a second. The other will be the idea of measuring results. So my question around testing is, it seems that trade shows, and I think you've alluded to this just a little bit, is you said, what are your goals, and then what's the profile of the client, that buyer persona. And so I'm assuming when you develop that, you also then develop an assumed value proposition for that client, and maybe even an offer for that buyer persona. Do you ever work with clients in terms of testing, maybe using lower level shows as an opportunity to test some of those assumptions? If it's a one-day show, maybe a more regional show, maybe in the morning you test one value proposition towards a specific buyer persona, and in the afternoon you test, maybe it's changing the literature, changing the backdrop, and changing how the booth staff communicates. Do you ever use trade shows to do testing of any nature of various marketing hypotheses?
It's been our experience, because of the cost of a trade show, to do A/B testing in other areas in the marketing timeline, and do that messaging through digital marketing, social media, and surveys, so that by the time you get to the show floor, that you are very clear on what the market needs are, and what your deliverable is, and how you stack up against the competition, and how you're going to present yourself to demonstrate that visually.
Got it. So you wouldn't even use smaller sort of regional shows to do testing. You would, at those, even be locked down in terms of what you would be presenting.
We would use some focus groups, and possibly incorporate some of that in the qualifying questions for establishing a relationship with the attendee. That's an opportunity to be able to gather information to support the messaging, but to switch messaging between day one and day two on the show floor could be very confusing, and that's a little risky.
Got it. Okay. So the final question that I have is around the metric or metricing or measurement of results. So when you're working with clients, and obviously you're taking advantage of a variety of values within the show, how do you quantify the results?
So there's a number of different ways that we do that, and technology is really opening up many doors of opportunities. In the larger booth spaces, we actually are able to track through heat sensors in the floors what is calling to the attendee. So if we set up 3 or 4 different workstations, we're able to track the foot traffic so that we can see what's in demand for that show. We're also using a number of touchscreen technologies for people to be able to opt in on what information are they requesting, and it allows them to be able to select the data and email it to them right from the show floor. And that's driven by the attendee. So it gives us very close to the purest data analysis that we can get. That is starting at the show floor. In the post-show follow-up, it's a matter of making sure that there's a good CRM solution that all of the leads are being put into so that they can be tracked in terms of understanding the sales cycle, understanding the conversion ratio, and even being able to track what impact the show floor is having on the brand recognition, which is going to be an impact on conversions, but it's more of a softer impact than direct dollars and cents.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, it's a bit softer.
Now, we're also using significant tracking through social media in some interactive promotions that are tied into the pre-show activity as it leads up to the show, and we can in very recent times now can look at what is the engagement that we're getting pre-show, and then how is that resulting to on-site appointments, and how is that engagement following through to visits to the booth or to a panel discussion or speaker session.
Right. And is it do you see a sort of major difference in the values you would take advantage of between your business to consumer clients and your business to business clients?
So I would have to say that 95% of our business is in B2B. And so I wouldn't be able to speak accurately to the B2C environment at this time.
Sure. Got it. Okay. That's great. Well, let's open it up. It's now 12 minutes before the hour. Let's open it up to any audience questions. Feel free to take your phone off of mute. I also have some that were pre-submitted, so I can throw some in there as well, but I wanted to open it up as soon as possible. Is there somebody on the phone who would like to ask a question, maybe dive into a topic within this that's most important for you?
Hi, this is Kelly. I have a question.
Sure, Kelly, go ahead.
You mentioned some information about building relationships with show management and collecting the data. Like, they put their prospectus out about who attends and the background information. How, in your experience with so many shows, where do you see the best way to get at that data, and B, how do you validate that data?
Or do you want to take that?
Yes. So thank you for the question. The first thing that you want to ask show management is the data that is in their materials audited? And there are several organizations that are accredited with the industry that do audit attendance records and also the breakdown of the demographics of the attendee with regard to their decision-making power, their budgets, and titles, and so forth and so on. So you want to ask them straight out, is the data audited, and who is it audited by? The second thing is, it's been my experience that the most honest answer comes from the best relationship. And so I cannot stress enough that if you've got a trade show program working for your company, the importance of building a relationship with not just the person who is selling you the booth space, but the person who's in charge of marketing the show, the person who is in charge of sponsorships, the person who is in charge of and even up to senior level in terms of producing the show, the person who has been with the organization the longest is a very valuable relationship to have. And then always feel that there's an opportunity for you to custom make a solution. So there's often been times where I needed to get some exposure, but I didn't have the money in the budget to go for a full-out press campaign. I know that in the New York Restaurant Show, I was able to get, from my relationship with show management, a referral, and they had an open space, and for $1,700, they had 3 articles, one each day in the show daily. They had an ad in every single show daily and a front page article in the pre-show daily. So that is an unbelievable opportunity, because in this day of content, you then can take those articles and you can repurpose them through your social media for the entire show. Also, think outside the box for sponsorship opportunities. Oftentimes, they'll create a sponsorship opportunity that will fit your budget and will give you more exposure or something that makes sense for you and your company.
Excellent. Oh, thank you, Laura. Let's see, is there another question from somebody on the phone?
Hey, Bill, this is John Hurley from MFX. How are you?
Welcome, John. How are you?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for holding this. It's actually very timely because we're going into, in the IT industry, there's a couple periods where we have these things, and October is a big month, as is February, March, and April. So those are big months. So MFX is an IT services outsourcing company, and to a large degree, the industry has gotten a little bit tainted towards trade shows. Back in the heydays of the 2000, right after Y2K and everything else, everybody was really into trade shows, and then gradually, as the years have gone by, people just, they waste lots of money on these shows, and then they don't know why. And the things that you guys have shared has been terrific.
Good.
One of the things I guess I would ask is, as you're dealing with a company that or an industry that is somewhat tainted towards this, what are some things that you can do just as a participant, not necessarily a leader, but as a participant to make sure that the trade show that you're attending or helping out with is you gain the most value out of it. So I'm not sure if that's something you guys can ask or answer rather, but I figured I'd ask it anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, but let's go to Laura first. Laura, what are your thoughts when you're, there certainly we see industries where there are certain components or segments are becoming anti-sponsors of trade shows, and what are some ways that or conversations that you've had that have helped sort of smooth that and get people back into understanding the value and opportunity?
So we have a tendency to be polite, and so when there's not clear communication, solutions oftentimes do not meet expectations. And so I would encourage you to be very frank with all of your partners in the trade show environment and really look and say, have we given it the attention that we need to? Have we really dug deep? Or are we giving the superficial, easy messaging? Have we really done our homework? Then reach out when you're speaking with show management and speak to them about, what the pulse of the industry is, what the feedback is that you're getting, and ask them, what role are they playing in improving the results and the reputation and the integrity of the shows. I've had very frank conversations. I was directly involved with the company producing CA World. We were very active in the .com industry. Now involved in supercomputing and a couple of other IT shows with publicly traded companies. And that conversation I just had with coming out of the APCO Public Safety Show was, these are solutions. Why are you giving out all these promotional products? 100 people ran and stripped the booth of the promotional products. I said, you collected 100 names that all they're going to do is waste the salespeople's time. How do you think that you're going to gain respect for this result? And so as we started to reevaluate and look at all of those planning practices and the relationship with show management and the company message based on benefit versus the features and what percentage of the show is really the target audience, we started to see very clearly we were being reactionary and not really going out and defining what we wanted. Hey, if you're going to a show that has 2,000 people and 5% of them is your target audience, then that's the 5% that you need to be focused on. And if it is 50 qualified people or 10 qualified people, the entire activity around that time, it should be focused on that as a goal and objective.
Those are great comments, Laura, and that actually really dovetail in very well with a lot of our thinking. John, I would even share, maybe even backing away from it a little bit. And when you look at all other forms of creating prospects and clients, all the tools that we have available for us in marketing and sales, trade shows, and I would say that, taking this with a B2B context or even a B2G, B2 government, either or, pretty much all of our other marketing and sales activities are aimed at only one thing, and that's getting face-to-face with a prospect. That's whether it's our social media, whether it's our e-news, whether it's, our cold calling or, letter campaign or whatever we might do. All of those activities are aimed at getting face-to-face with a prospect. I think the fundamental thing that trade shows do is they get us face-to-face with prospects. The challenge is if you're going to a trade show, you're aiming at, no matter what kind of business you're in, you're aiming at a small percentage of the attendees, whether it's 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 attendees. It's really about aiming at them. So I think it's having a booth strategy that teases out or gets the attendees to separate, just like you would if you were fishing in the ocean, right? You're fishing in the ocean. There are 20,000 species of fish. If you're fishing, you don't go with generic bait. You go with bait that only your fish is interested in. So, I think the two things that I'd suggest is, number one is it's by far the best way to get face to face with a prospect, most efficient. They're in the room. The challenge is separating the prospects from the general attendee. And then, so that's the goal of the booth. And then, of course, the whole one-on-one meeting opportunities that salespeople have while they're there. And as Laura said earlier, really architecting the show so that there are a lot of preset meetings and that the salespeople are well occupied doing things outside of the booth, because you want people in the booth that are more transactional, and all they're trying to do is identify of the 100,000 attendees. They're trying to find whether it's the 50 or the 100 or 250 that are actual prospects. And prospects have a need, they have money, and they have urgency. If they don't have all three, they're not a prospect. So I think it's those kind of core principles. But it's a great question for sure. We are right at 1 o'clock now. Yeah, Laura, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing real quick too, is that, with the fishing analogy, when we fish, if the fish is too small, we throw it back. And I
Right.
think that there has to be, that qualification process needs to be set in such a way that there's a mark on the one that has to be thrown back. If they come back the following year, once they've matured and become a qualified prospect, then you can take them in. But until they've matured, if you put them into your sales funnel, all they're going to do is waste time.
Right. Absolutely. It is just 1 o'clock now. I want to really be observant of everybody's time. I know people probably have appointments to get to. This has been recorded, so we will share as soon as we can, get this uploaded and whatnot. We'll share this back with you, the recording. Certainly feel free to share it internally or with others you think might value it. I'll include, when I email, I'll include Laura as a carbon copy in an email. So if anybody wants to touch base with her directly, you can do that. Do I have your permission to do that, Laura?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. But this has been fantastic. Laura, the information you shared was great. Any sort of closing thought that would kind of sum this all up?
I think that if a show is not working for you and you reach out and it doesn't get corrected, that you shouldn't go to the show. And I think that if you have a number of shows in your trade show program, that it's better to do a smaller amount of shows right and apply the appropriate resources than to do more shows halfway done. Great
thought to close on. That would certainly be our recommendations as well. So this has been a real pleasure to be with you, Laura, and everybody on the phone. Thank you so much for your flexibility. We apologize that the technology didn't cooperate. This again has been it's been a really good system for us, the YouTube live system, but it appears that there's some kind of glitch there. So we will figure out what that is, and we've got a great webinar coming up in September, on September 19th. We're going to have Scott McGregor from Something New. They're a staffing company for salespeople, and they're a really innovative, cool company. And the topic is going to be nailing the follow-up, close more sales. So taking some of what we talked about today in terms of generating high quality, sort of volumes, the right volume of high quality leads, and then what do we do with them? And often, from what we see, this is where a lot of organizations fall short in terms of what type of follow-up they do, how quickly it's done, and so on. So we're really looking forward to that, and hopefully you'll join us there. And again, sorry for the technology challenge, but I appreciate everybody's flexibility in making it over to the conference line. So Laura, again, thank you, and we'll follow up within the next day with a link to this recording, and really appreciate everybody being with us today.
Thank you for having me, and have a great day.
You all too. Bye now.